It is my pleasure to welcome our speakers tonight in this very, very crowded Hastings Hall, Carrie Norman and Thomas Kelley of the architectural firm Norman Kelley. They are this semester's Louis I. Kahn Visiting Assistant Professors of Architectural Design. Professors Kelley and Norman follow Omar Gandhi, Scott Ruff, Todd Reese, Fernanda Canales, who have been among our more recent Kahn assistant professors, or Kahn juniors as we call them. And the purpose of the Kahn assistant professorship is to bring young architect educators to the School of Architecture, offering them this opportunity to lead an advanced studio. The gift that supports this professorship, made by an anonymous donor in 2004, has in its endowment the following phrase, that it is for, quote, individuals who have been identified as young leaders in the field of architectural design in the hopes that Yale will be able to both support and benefit from the next generation of master architects, unquote. It's wonderful to be able to add Carrie and Thomas to the list of Kahn assistant professors, which also includes, if you look a little further back, Jeannie Gang and Tatiana Bilbao, and partnerships not unlike yours, such as Sarah Caples and Everardo Jefferson, and Alan Organsky and Elizabeth Gray. Carrie and Thomas opened their practice in 2012, and it seems to have some flexibility as to its geography and location. Currently, it's based in Cambridge and Chicago, but it's been elsewhere. I'm sensing from all the reading I did that you sort of follow your teaching gigs and open an office wherever you might be. You can correct me if I'm wrong when you give your lecture. Anyhow, Carrie Norman received her BS in architecture from the University of Virginia and her Master's of Architecture from Princeton University. She's a licensed architect in New York, Louisiana, and Illinois, maybe even others now. And before starting Norman Kelley, she was a senior architect at Shop Architects in New York. She's an accomplished academic as well as practitioner. She's currently an assistant professor at MIT and has taught at Tulane, NJIT, Columbia University, the University of Pennsylvania, and at the GSD at Harvard. Thomas Kelley also received his BS in architecture from the University of Virginia and his master's in architecture from Princeton. He grew up in cities around the world. Maybe this is part of the mobile office thing. Canberra, Australia, Berlin, Washington, D.C., with a lot of stops in between. He was a fellow of the American Academy in Rome in 2013 and is currently an assistant professor at the University of Illinois in Chicago. He also taught at the University of Buffalo, Syracuse University, and also at the GSD. Norman Kelley has won numerous design awards, including the Young Architects Prize from the Architectural League of New York in 2014. More recently, they were named United States Artists and were debut finalists in the Lisbon Architecture Triennale. They've won design awards from Interior Magazine and the Architect's newspaper, and their work has been published in the New York Times, Log, Architect Magazine, Domus, and Wallpaper, among many, many other publications. They've been included in the Venice Architecture Biennale and in the inaugural Chicago Architecture Biennial, where their piece is, maybe we'll see it tonight, this rather extraordinary drawing across the facade of the Chicago Cultural Center. So we are very happy to welcome Thomas Kelley and Carrie Norman at Yale this semester. Please join me in applauding them and welcoming them for their lecture tonight, Being Particular. Thanks.
Good evening.
Thank you so much to Dean Burke and Sunil Ball for their generous invitation to be a part of your faculty this semester. We're truly honored. The studio we are teaching is titled A Particular New England Building. And while we do care about New England, tonight we're hoping to open with our thoughts on the particular, both as a percept and a concept. And while our audience is primarily our 10 students sitting in the crowd, we hope that together we might arrive at some consensus on what constitutes an architecture of particularity.
In our work, interiors are renewed, furniture is reconditioned, exhibitions are reformatted, and criticism is retrospective. We look back to look forward. And so after 10 years of working together, it comes as no surprise that the common thread to our collaboration is that the work succeeds something found. And by found, we are exacting. Like the Smithsons, the as found is something physical, something complete, an extant building, a brick, or a piece of furniture. The completeness of the object is subject to examination, however. We breathe our sites, we review original drawings, we speak with the community. To succeed, something found demands that we forego novelty for something more particular. For example, here we have a chair. More precisely, it's a Windsor bench, also referred to as a settee. 2 people should be able to sit in this chair comfortably, yet this chair was made by incorrectly following a set of instructions. A partial front elevation is spliced with a complete side elevation. Intentional incompetence still results in a bench, but now you'll need to sit closer to your partner.
The awkwardness is exacerbated at a dinner party. The particular is both process and property. It not always resonates as idiosyncratic, but instead oscillates between forms of contextual legibility that share equal favor with the obvious, like a table whose form has been sheared to signal an exit in a house museum.
As well as the esoteric, like a remontage of Stanley Tigerman's 1978 Titanic postcard foregrounded by an architect looking complacent while his building sinks into Lake Michigan. If whatever we are looking to uncover is hiding in plain sight, it's usually fair game. After all, you need to see it too.
We call this way of looking dumb optics, or perhaps reflective is a more accurate term than dumb. At any rate, think of it like the death of the grand tour, or an expanded balance between modernist tendencies to abstract tradition with vernacular tendencies to reflect it. We're not saying that architects should replace a trip to Rome with a jaunt through their own backyard, but it is important to our work that the immediacy of context be tethered to meaning.
Furthermore, how we foreground some latent potential within an existing context tends to lean a bit counterintuitive. For example, a retail shop is remodeled to obscure a precious view of a tree to accommodate an egress stair to a storage basement.
The result is not profound, but practical. The view, once shared by all, is now reserved for employees only. Indirect sunlight even helps the product labels read better.
Like a tailor, we make alterations of something that already exists in the world. While the economics of reuse are hard to disagree with, we strive to do more with less to keep costs down and impact high. Here, for an exhibition on the work of the artist and architect Shusaku Arakawa and his collaborator and wife, the poet and philosopher Madeline Gins, we recover a prohibited drawing. Complications in the curation process emerged because of legal disputes between 2 foundations, each of which claimed ownership of Arakawa and Gins' body of work. In the late stages of the curation process, many drawings initially selected for exhibition were prohibited due to the ongoing legal battles of ownership, including this sketch. From one of Arakawa and Gins' most significant projects, The Mechanism of Meaning. To recover the drawing, we reconstructed it.
The result is, on one hand, a drawing approximating Arakawa's original sketch, and on the other, 2 containers for the display of framed works, archival ephemera, and a bench that sometimes displays a person.
When we begin to take stock of the ways in which we are conditioned to comprehend people, places, and things, the particular serves to provoke a fundamental question. What is context? Context is everything. Context is anything. Context includes and excludes. What is context but a bunch of stuff that one filters in or filters out? Our desire to engage context head-on is not meant to replace authorship with refinement or promote a rear-guard aesthetic movement, but rather to incite an egalitarian way of interpreting the world around us. The result is not a question of how regional or how global something might come off, but a question of how to make something public, or at least visually accessible, and to do so in a manner that completes a place without seeming specious or populist. Sometimes our interventions blend in with the material or construction fabric of a larger project, as in the case of the most recent American Pavilion at the Venice Biennial.
Or sometimes our work questions and advances social narratives that once attended the object's original dimensions and proportions. The original tilt-top tea table, more than the teapot or the teacup that rested on its surface, was the object by which the ritual of tea drinking gained its recognition and acceptance. The quote-unquote brash honesty, or let's say gossip, that characterized tea table discussions constituted a sort of circumspection that effectively policed the actions of the powerful and elite by threatening to expose scandal and subject any wrongdoers to ridicule. Our revision extends the watchful eye of the tilt-top tea table by lengthening the pedestal to elevate the vertically oriented tabletop. To polite society, being particular is the way one might refer to someone with obsessive-compulsive disorder. To someone like Bertrand Russell, however, a particular condition is better understood by its relationship to its opposite, something universal. To us, being particular means being selective and absorbing our immediate surroundings with conviction. We understand that defining particular is a nebulous practice. Tonight, think of the particular as being situated somewhere between essential and accidental. In a building project, the essential might be the reduction of form to construction standards and egress requirements, or primitive containers towards maximizing FAAR. In the same project, the accidental might be a singular and fleeting observation about a specific material, a prosaic social encounter between users, or a Harold Bloom-like swerve. At the center of these two poles is an idea of an architecture that is approximate, regional, and site-sensitive. We are indebted to the works of Johnson Mark Lee, Kenneth Frampton, and Allison and Peter Smithson for all affinities and any additional confusion.
We're going to jump into some projects. At 5,000 square feet, this is the largest interior we've designed. The project was a conversion of a baking pan factory turned art gallery turned sneaker shop. The major alterations to the existing space consisted of an enfilade made up of 10 rooms. Specific to an enfilade, the rooms are connected but independent. No doors, only thick thresholds separate the 10 rooms. Each room is designed so that the owner can theme the space according to a specific product: clothing, footwear, an apothecary, or an event, reading, a lecture, a transaction. Here's an existing plan of the site, ground floor consisting of 2 units. On the right, you have the street, and the alley is on the left. The owner had operated their original sneaker shop out of the northern unit, highlighted in red, and art gallery occupied the larger footprint, highlighted in yellow. And a couple of things to note in this plan are the 3 columns that you can't see but are buried in the really thick demising wall between the 2 spaces, and that the majority of the spaces were inaccessible by wheelchair. The immediate history of the space is that it was home to one of Chicago's still most prominent art gallerists, Rona Hoffman. On the right, a previous exhibition at her gallery by the Iraqi-American artist Michael Rakowitz. Rona now has a new space located in Chicago's West Town. The more distant history of the space is that it was home to a baking pan company owned and operated by Edward Katzinger. Today, the sneaker shop is located on the first floor of the 5-story Edward Katzinger factory building located in Chicago's West Loop, a neighborhood once home to the city's wholesale meat and produce market, as well as Oprah's Harpo Studios. The building's high ceilings and exposed timber are symptomatic of industrial nostalgia, and as of a few years ago, the entire Fulton-Randolph district was landmarked. And since Oprah's studios moved, the district is now subject to a massive gentrification onslaught by food, tech, and hotel industries that crave a more authentic Chicago. That said, the essential read on the project began with its existing structural base. The existing space, once the original factory's loading dock, consists of 14 heavy timber columns, sized at approximately 1 feet by 1 feet in plan. Because the space was used as a loading dock, another existing condition of note is a dramatic 3-foot change in elevation from sidewalk to the main floor. Like we mentioned before, essential to the project was this ambition of the enfilade. A new plan aims to wedge a 3x3 bay plan inside of the original 8x3 bay plan. This central enfilade looks like a disfigured pinwheel spinning around a central build-out space for the owner to feature their rotating list of artist and designer collaborations. The enfilade is never idealized or perfected, and remnants of the original factory plan remain. Like brick walls that once housed a vault, for example, disfigured the essential reading of the plan. The result of this organization of rooms are views that glimpse up to 3 rooms simultaneously. Inside these view corridors, one detaches from the building's industrial past. The heavy timber columns and beams are absorbed into thickened walls, partially indexed by off-white painted hardwood returns, and a fire-rated continuous drywall ceiling. Here, a view through the fitting rooms, the only spot where the concrete flooring is covered with a softer material. I think the owner actually wants you to try on the shoes. Apart from some rocks that figure into the suspended rack systems, much of the display material is fairly ordinary. For example, the point of sale and sneaker wall are finished in a pickled OSB. The liability, however, of the enfilade is its lack of perceptible entry or starting point. To manage this dislocation, as well as to finally provide an accessible entrance into a space that preceded inclusive design, we fashioned a stair ramp, or stramp, out of 5,000 Chicago common bricks. The form weaves around a single exposed heavy timber column and consists of 4 gradual inclines with intermediate steps between the angled transitions. The construction of the stramp consists of multiple layers. Geofoam was used to shape the major elevation changes in the ramp. A skim coat of concrete was then applied to the geofoam, and finally the stairs and ramps were shaped by a tile setter, not a mason, using a slower drying concrete mix to achieve the highest degree of tolerance. Here are some photos depicting that layering process. As I mentioned before, 5,000 recycled Chicago common brick pavers were sourced from a local brickyard nearby Pilsen. We managed the layout of each brick. The horizontal bond is a running bond where the bricks are colored yellow. We stipulated a dry butt joint to achieve an uninterrupted bond between ramps and landings. And the red bricks denote a half-brick soldier bond to account for the risers of the stairs. Here an image of the bricks before grouting. Here an image of the bricks after grouting. During the day, the stramp foregrounds what we've observed to be a delayed entry, or perhaps a double entry. Once you step off the street and into the shop, you are not greeted by anyone. You're given space to wander up the stramp where someone from the staff might greet you. At night, when the shop is closed, the stramp disappears and the setback enfilade becomes apparent. The shop now reads as a series of rooms nested 1 structural bay away from the street, signaling the setback entry or starting point of the commercial experience. Much of the success of the stramp is that it promotes a form of retail space that is about unselling. The space is open to use, and we're very proud that the stramp has surpassed all of our accessibility goals. I think originally our intention was to simply make accessibility cool again. I think OMA had done it years back with their IIT Student Center, but here are some of the many ways in which the owners actually use the stramp. They include workshops, speaking events, toy and book drives, coffee shop pop-ups, art installations, and numerous other activities.
In 2021, right as the world was coming out of pandemic lockdown, we collaborated with the Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago and curators Michael Darling and Dan Nadel to stage an exhibition titled Chicago Comets, 1960s to Now. If you're not familiar with the Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago, the building was completed in 1996 by the German architect Joseph Paul Kleehaus and is a highly rational but maybe somewhat forgettable form. Johnston Mark Lee renovated the museum in 2017, and the exhibition occupied the 4th floor gallery of the museum, which consists of 4 original vaulted rooms around an open atrium. If you zoom out, you will see that the museum is situated in the middle of an elongated corridor of city park land between Michigan Avenue and Lake Michigan. The aerial photograph is oriented north, so the vaults stretch out east-west. In the past, the vault form has typically been an opportunity for other exhibitors to resist, embrace, or as you see in the middle image, show complete indifference toward the form. Our proposal would land somewhere in the middle as well. The exhibition was conceived by the Brooklyn-based curator at large, as mentioned, Dan Nadel. Dan is a real comics nerd. I think he's currently working on a biography of R. Crumb. The exhibition was accompanied by Dan's book, It's Life as I See It, Black Cartoonists in Chicago, 1940 to 1980. The exhibition traced the evolution of comics in Chicago through the work of overlooked and underrepresented cartoonists who either started in Chicago or continue to thrive in Chicago. Mainstay cartoonists like Chris Ware, Linda Berry, and Carrie James Marshall were given monographic space alongside newcomers like Nick Dernasso and Lily Carr, who were given similar areas to share their work. One of the younger cartoonists in the show was the artist Edie Fake. Edie's work sometimes privileges the architectural elevation and couples a slightly deadpan, slightly illusory take on the cartoon frame through the use of a vibrant color palette that recalls the work of the Bolivian architect Freddie Mamani. While most of the work was loaned to the museum by the artists or their collectors, Edie was commissioned to produce a new work, a large site-specific mural of their elevations that would greet guests at the exhibition entrance. And we immediately gravitated to the idea of collaborating with Edie on work, given our experience working on one-to-one size building drawings. This time, however, we thought it would be most effective if Edie's color palette could foreshadow the greater exhibition's layout and organization. So in collaboration with Edie, we picked Corbusier's architectural polychromy. It seemed like the default color palette a cartoonist might select if they were trying to describe serious architecture. The desaturated palette from 1931 is also nicely contrasted by the more vibrant palette from 1959. If you haven't seen the film Chasing Amy, I encourage you to check it out to understand the low esteem regarded for the cartoonist's assistant, who typically colors in the cartoonist's hard line work. In our case, we were very honored to be Edie's assistant. Before you enter the show, you are greeted by a composite view of every color you will experience throughout the show. Once inside the 4 vaulted galleries, our spatial approach to the works was captured by inserting 13 15-foot tall partition walls to create 17 smaller rooms inside the vaulted galleries. Each wall spanned a width of 24 feet, or the short width of the vault. Since most of the artwork was relatively small, it also made sense to resist the vault and partition the vast space. The partition walls were punctured by large threshold and window openings. Since the works were displayed chronologically, it was important to us and the curator that the severity of the timeline be disrupted with views that jumped back and forth in time. Returning to the Corbusian color palette foreshadowed in Edie's mural, the walls of the enfilade were coded so that while viewers might confuse time, they would appreciate orientation. If you recall the aerial view of the museum, Lake Michigan faces east, a cardinal direction critical to understanding the composition of Chicago. So east-facing walls were painted in vibrant colors, and west-facing walls were painted with the same colors with desaturated tones. We let as many artists as possible have a say in their space's color palette. So here are a couple videos documenting the two-tone effect of the gallery installation. Much of the show's circulation was derived from either the curator's chronology or the size of the work. It was also fitting that we designed the vitrines for the exhibition that were equally derivative. Apparently, Johnston and Markley had proposed a vitrine design at one point during the renovation that was not completed. So we essentially took their initial concept and refined it so that the museum might be able to use it for future exhibitions. With the addition of some L-angle steel legs, a wall vitrine can easily become a table. Thanks, Mark and Sharon.
The limits of public space within the city are difficult to track. For one, the space, whether it be interior or exterior, requires the conditioning of a certain degree of comfort. That comfort might include issues of accessibility or basic standards of airflow. The ability for subjects and objects to coexist inside of a public space is where our most permanent public work is measured. But even comfort is not enough for certain clients. They desire spectacle. To meet those demands, we've embraced technology head-on to examine its ability to produce new forms of comfort within the public realm. And over the past 2 years, we've had the privilege to complete 3 office lobby projects. In each case, we worked toward bringing an old office building up to new security measures. Our task also involved considering what is public in a private lobby. The following 3 works use a range of technologies to initiate new forms of gathering through light, sound, and video. Luminary is a cafe bar located in the lobby of 303 East Wacker Drive, a 30-story office building originally designed by Joseph Fujikawa in 1979. In Chicago, Fujikawa and his partners Bruno Contarato and Dirk Lohan are almost as famous as Mies van der Rohe. They were the associates in his practice who would take over once Mies passed in 1969. This building, among many others, pepper Chicago's skyline with a style of homage that borders on adulation. Here are a couple of views of what the lobby looked like before. One of its signature features is a double-height atrium that connects the lower level of the lobby to Chicago's pedway system. Otherwise, the lobby was not the kind of space you wanted to delay your commute. The primary alteration to the existing lobby is a new floor. The slab is infilled to reduce the size of the excessive atrium. From there, we added a bar, seating area, and 128 suspended point lights. Together, these elements draw inspiration from the finishes and details of Miesian Tower lookalikes, or the Chicago office buildings built after 1969 in the shadow of Mies's death by his many acolytes. On the left is the original plan. On the right are infill with a square bar and some circular tables. Above the bar in the escalator atrium are 2 light fixture arrays, each consisting of 64 16-foot tall white metal tubes with 2-inch diameter LED point lights. The fixtures are set into a bespoke drop ceiling tile grid, allowing for easy access to a new plenum for maintenance. On the left, our reflected ceiling plan of this fixture. On the right, Richard Lippold's reflected ceiling plan for the light sculpture designed for the Four Seasons restaurant within Mises Seagram building. In our version, the drop ceiling, seams, and sprinkler head locations add to the ornament. Advancing Fujikawa's affinity for derivative acts, our proposal is a copy within a copy. Located in Chicago's Central Loop, this lobby sits within the 41-story office building designed by John Burgee Architects with Philip Johnson in 1987 for the John Buck Company, a real estate law practice. The space recalls the decadence of a cathedral with 50-foot tall vaulted gold leaf ceilings. The main lobby is accessed off of LaSalle Street, or Chicago's Bankers Row, and here you're greeted by security. That would be the entrance at the bottom of your screen. The secondary entrance off of Adams Street to your left opens onto a cafe. Our renovation included the addition of several elements: a cafe, turnstiles, relocation of an enunciator panel, new seating, and an amphitheater. And while we would have added more features, the existing sculpture by the artist Anthony Caro, titled Chicago Fugue, turned out to be more expensive to move than it would be to contextualize. So let's zoom into the amphitheater, and we'll get back to the lobby. The amphitheater consists of multiple concentric circles, attenuating to 2 points on a circle that measures 27 feet in diameter. The amphitheater stands 12 feet tall and replaced a single black marble security desk. Its tread and seats are finished in the same gold marble of the floor, and its risers are clad in perforated brass. From a purely formal standpoint, the amphitheater allows visitors to occupy the apse and provides additional seating for the nearby cafe and elevated views of the lobby and its guests. However, the amphitheater is also an instrument that attempts to manage the existing space's reverberant acoustical nature and reflect the figurative instrument sculpture by Anthony Caro on the opposite side of the lobby. Here, a balloon test video exhibiting the amount of echo and reverb one hears in the apse. In collaboration with iArt, a Swiss studio for media architectures that in the past has worked with, I think most recently with Herzog and Demeron on their M+ Pavilion media facade, alongside also a German sound scenographer that go by the name Ideonklang. We designed an immersive audio experience that set discreetly behind the risers of the amphitheater and on the underside of its shell. Once the amphitheater senses a user's presence through its 81 light sensors and 3 motion sensors, a musical score comprised of 15 instruments, 4 tempos, and 7 keys and scales play. The software is driven by parameters that include time of day and weather. Here is Ramon from Ideonklang to explain the Ableton software used and some of its attendant parameters in greater detail. It's a long video, so I'm going to cut it at about 2 minutes.
Hey everybody, this is my presentation of the LaSalle patch, Max Ableton Live patch. And I'm gonna start with a little overview how the patch is built up. So what you can see on the top are different layers of instruments. So each layer is one instrument. And within these instruments we have different clips. They are sometimes alternating, so each clip is actually consisting a composition. So for example here you can hear a so-called synth, bass synth, massive as its name, and it plays these deep tones. Or, for example, we can hear some percussion tracks, like this one here. Played by a percussionist called Thomas Weiss. I'm going to show you a picture here. We mainly record like different brass instruments, like you can see here. He has hundreds of thousands of different instruments, and we build them up here in front of microphones to record. All right. Also, additionally to that, we have like weather layers. Each layer, like rain, consisting out of different sub-layers. We have like different distribution path. Like each sound is distributed to 8 channels, as you can see.
I don't even think the owners watched the whole video, but nonetheless, it's complex. 9 amplifiers that are nested underneath the amphitheater, along with its low voltage wiring. And here a detail of the acoustic components assembly that we designed, both for emitting sound and absorbing ambient noise. Here's some construction photos showing the kind of structural steel insulation, as well as the brass finish. And until you make it to Chicago, which hopefully soon, we'll share you a little video of the experience. finally, in collaboration with Spencer McNeil, we've recently completed a retail cart featuring locally roasted coffee, a seasonally inspired grab-and-go menu, and curated everyday essentials in the lobby at 515 North State Street, a 29-story office building owned by an affiliate of Beacon Capital Partners. The lobby is located in Chicago's River North neighborhood. The building was originally designed by Kenzo Tange in 1990. The lobby is clad in stainless steel and polished granite and features the architect's unique blend of Japanese style and modernist detailing. In keeping with Tange's architectural legacy, the cart is an abstraction of a traditional form. The cart measures 5 meters long, 2 meters wide, and 3.4 meters tall, and recalls the image of a stationary yatai cart, or the mobile food stall dating back to 17th century Japan. The term yatai translates to food stand. In lieu of a traditional yatai cart's 2 wheels, our cart rests on 6 stainless cylinders, atop which appear to float stainless steel refrigeration equipment and an array of wood shelving for coffee and light refreshment service. Where typically a yatai cart would feature a gabled roof to protect its goods and operator from the elements, this cart features an open ceiling that supports a 4-sided continuous LED ribbon that is designed to pair with an existing 7-meter-tall media wall. Like a dynamic banner, the screens display messages to passersby, include text, icons, and moving images. Although the cart is stationary, its abstracted metallic form is designed to imbue the lobby and adjacent public plaza with the image of movement. Here, another video.
In another collaboration with architect Spencer McNeil, we recently completed the renovation of an apartment for a furniture and art collector. Like many of us, the pandemic meant that the owners were spending a little more time at home. In addition to moving their collection out of storage to their home, they also wanted a home that might accommodate their growing family. The apartment is located within a concrete tower with a peculiar section. Each of the units are fairly long, with 8 to 9 foot tall ceilings that cover the majority of the living spaces. The exception is a double or sometimes triple heighted living room with sweeping views of the city. So here an image of what a typical living room within the building might look like. The wall you see floating above the dining room on the left is a demising wall that separates the above unit's primary bedroom from the living room below. In our case, the owner was living in the upper unit and had acquired the lower unit with the intention of combining the two. Noted in red is the demising wall that separated the upper and lower units. The consolidation of the 2 units was straightforward. We simply demolished the demising wall. Now both units shared 1 living space. What was once a primary bedroom in the upper unit was converted into an office mezzanine. And while we performed a lot of other surgery to the layout of the lower unit to provide adequate closet space, improve the bathrooms, and provide more rational kitchen and dining areas, the biggest challenge of the project was the connection between the 2 units. Because the owners wanted to be able to access each level from within their units, a staircase was required to stitch the 2 together. So in addition, the upper unit was to be left as untouched as possible. The owner had renovated it prior. Existing to the upper unit, however, was a very dark, ebonized oak floor. It made the entire space feel detached from the light-filled living room. So as part of our proposal to get the job, we pitched a staircase that would assimilate the transition in form and finish between the 2 levels. This resulted in a framework for the entire finish schedule for the project. The upper unit would absorb light, the lower unit would reflect it. The structure and details of the staircase were designed so that it might coexist alongside the owner's vast collection of chairs. Here, a couple a couple of view of the staircase from above and below. A single steel stringer is bent to create a 3/4 spiral to support 15 uniquely stained treads that provide a seamless connection between the existing ebonized wood on the upper unit and the new white oak flooring on the lower unit. In addition to the staircase, much of our work also consisted of curating the owner's collection of chairs and designing some bespoke flexible display systems to show them. And while the sheer amount of space may seem decadent to a New Yorker, the space became challenging to consider how to display and use a collection of around 100 chairs. So behind the staircase, on the wall that most people might hang their TVs, we hung chairs on pegs. Recalling a shaker-style system of raising chairs to clean, the display system provided the owner with a wall that could rotate the collection. So here a detailed view of a Fornasetti chair hung alongside some books. Sprinkled through the owner's collection of chairs and other objects, we were also tasked with filling in the space with functional objects that were designed to blend into the collection. Here, a drawing of the primary bedroom and the platform bed that is made from the same white oak planks as you see in the floor. The owner is inspired by Donald Judd, and so we tried to recreate a similar platform bed to the one you can't sleep on at Judd's Spring Street apartment. And here, a George Nelson bench is redesigned using Ipe wood so that it might be in the shower. And here, a series of 4 bar stools made from walnut using some loose curvature, inspired by a nearby George Nakashima table and a Wharton Esherick lectern that the owner uses to hold their cookbooks. And finally here, a composite plan drawing of all the stool seats. This is the only drawing we provided to our woodworker. The drawing was meant to be suggestive of a loose shape with rational geometry. And it is here that we conclude our talk with a particular shop drawing. Thanks.
We have time for some questions. Oh, I see a hand already.
Not bad. No.
Hi, thank you for the talk. It was really interesting. I have a question can you elaborate a little bit for just navigating the particularities between the larger, more public projects to like the more private, smaller projects? Like I imagine the amount of information and just other specificities will vary a lot. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Jess. Jess is one of our students this semester. So I think the question is about scale and public versus private. I think when it comes to the recent lobby projects that we've been able to work within, the I guess particularity of history tends to take on more presence than in some of the maybe smaller works that we do. And the reason why I say that is that some of the history isn't always that great to embellish or to try and even correct. Sometimes it's there and one must deal with it. And so in some cases, the hope is that we're diverting attention to more immediate histories or kind of different attitudes towards the existing history that might be more, I think, accessible to someone who doesn't necessarily work in those spaces. And so we found, at least with some of the lobby projects, that I guess smuggling in technology and appealing to senses that are outside of the purely visual are ways in which to, I think, engage in kind of other parts of those buildings' histories.
Hi, Thanks for your lecture. I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit more on the role of the drawing in your practice, and especially with regard to particularities of place. Do you see that as something that should be translated in how or what you draw? And I'm also wondering if you've thought about how your own particularities as individuals and as a partnership are reflected in the work that you do.
Thanks, Jerry, who's also in our studio.
It's thrilling that you guys are asking questions.
You were so quiet at the review earlier. Look, I think when we started our practice, we believed that by scaling up drawing, we could act like building. So much of the kind of the early drawings were one-to-one or used anamorphosis to try and correct the view within an existing space. They often felt like one-liners. They were usually temporary. And so I think those drawings differ from a lot of the drawings we do now that kind of manifest somewhere closer to 2D, as documents that are meant to kind of relate to something three-dimensional. That said, I think even in kind of their retroactive kind of qualities, I think they are a way for Carrie and myself to communicate. We've known each other since we've been 18, so we actually learned to draw together by hand. And so I think the challenge now that we face is trying to kind of balance some more kind of efficient ways of drawing that can become legible in some of the more kind of three-dimensional works. And oftentimes that is in the form of unconventional instructions that we provide to, in this case, a woodworker, or at other times, a steel fabricator, to try and inform what we think is important to the work.
It may be closer to the kind of work that you're up to, and that we're up to in the studio. Centers on maybe elevating the value of documentation as it pertains to reuse projects. So if we're to continue along that trajectory of work, I think it's sort of inseparable from the modes of documentation that support the observations of the existing conditions and so forth. So that lends itself to particular ways of seeing the existing conditions that get translated into the drawings. Over time, more and more, increasingly, we and the students at the studio have all heard us say this many times now, refer to like the documentation one does prior to an existing building project as the as-found set, not the as-built set, which takes into account time. So increasingly, we're kind of taking on the questions that we're taking on together with you. So we're also very excited to learn from the 10 of you this semester on what it means to draw plays, what it means to draw out those values.
Anybody else?
Thank you.